Now, with over 150 world leaders in attendance and a deadline of 2030, the United Nations General Assembly continues today, and the event will wrap up at the weekend. Now, the major focus is finding possible ways to achieve the development goals before the deadline. We'll get into the conversation shortly, but first of all, let's take a look at the objectives of the Climate Ambition Summit. Now, from what you see on the screen, the objectives include to provide platform for first movers and doers from businesses, financial institutions, cities and regions to demonstrate progress on delivering on their net zero pledges. And another one includes to provide platform for first movers, net zero pledges as well by developing, implementing credible accountability and transition plans. Now, this is one objective amongst many other things. There are also some other infographics that we'll be displaying very shortly. But in the meantime, let's delve into the conversation. And of course, I have my guests joining me today. First up, I have Dr. Dorothy Bassey, the immediate past president of the Nigerian Environmental Society, and of course, the first female national president of the gathering. Thank you so much, Dr. Dorothy, for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. All right. Secondly, we have Richard Abubakar Umar, the founder of Youth Voyage. Thank you, Richard, for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure as well. So, Dr. Dorothy and Richard, as we well know, the United Nations General Assembly is currently happening. And there's so many salient issues that have been raised so far. But for the purpose of this conversation, I would like for us to focus majorly on climate change and, of course, to also focus on the speech the president of Nigeria gave at the summit. Now, Dr. Dorothy, the president has addressed the United Nations Assembly, and he talked about the issue of climate change, the issue of unemployment, amongst many other things. But for you, I would like for us to, to know, first off, do you think the speech covered the most important aspects that the most important issues that we're facing as a country?
Yes, personally, thank you once again and good afternoon. Personally, I think the speech covered critical key issues, particularly as it relates to Nigeria as a country, to the sub-region, and to Africa as a whole. However, we need to begin to look beyond speeches and look more towards action. Because as we all know, this is the 78th session. And I can very confidently boast that if we look at the past couple of years and the meetings that have been held, and we look at what is on ground, there's going to be a lot of disparity. So for me, essentially, when we make policies or we make commitments or we give the views and opinions and speeches, as it were, I would like that our speeches and our commitments are not far from action, the actions that we need to take, the actions that need to translate those promises into reality. I will stop there. But yes,
Dr.
indeed,
Dorothy,
he covered the critical issues.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, Richard, as the founder of Youth Voyage, what would you say about the summit as it concerns the youth? Now, speaking of representation, I remember yesterday on the program, we're talking about women decrying the lack of representations in global scenarios like this. And aside the women, there's also the youth who would generally love to be a part of these kind of summits, but we don't exactly hear them speak or see them being fully represented. Do you think that they're adequately, appropriately represented at the summit?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, some of my colleagues are at the United Nations currently participating at the SDG Summit, and some of them are participating even at the General Assembly in some sideline meetings. And actually, young people have been carried along in the beat right from the time of the negotiations of the SDGs. I was the only African young person that joined 11 African young people to advocate for youth inclusion and participation on the SDG document. So I was at the UN General Assembly in 2015 in New York, and we advocated for that component into the SDGs document. So young people have been carried along, I must say, I must be fair, from the conceptualization of the SDGs document, which I'm a living witness to that, and to the ratification, to the launching of the document, and even to the implementation, because our advocacy at that time was to ensure that young people are carried along into the implementation process. And a lot of us have been very active, especially through the United Nations Major Group on Children and Youth, which my organization happens to be a member, and even through the IMF and the World Bank, which I happen to be a member too of that on those platforms. And everything we do there is all about advocating for young people participation, and even seeing to the fact that we achieve these goals, and governments follow the right mechanism in implementation. But the major challenges we're having on ground is on implementation greatly, because from the look of things, 2030 is not achievable. We must be realistic about that. And if 2030 is not achievable, what next are we doing? Because we have to be very categorical about the milestones. Have we achieved the targets? Are the indicators showing that we've come a long way in terms of providing healthcare, in terms of providing quality education, in terms of providing portable drinking water and addressing the wash issues, in terms of our ocean life, in terms of our general livelihood? So basically, you agree with me that all these part of the goals have not been achieved based on our own observation as young people and as advocates of the Sustainable Development Goals. So, but with a little light on what Mr. President has said, he was very categorical about the position of Nigeria and Africa in terms of climate change, and he raised the issues of subsidy removal and the issue of fossil fuel and renewable energy. So all these are all encompassed. So we need to really ensure that our NDCs are achieved, and Nigeria is doing its best greatly in terms of achieving the NDCs. So I am very confident that his speech was very ambitious, and he was very direct and straightforward to global leaders, especially even as it affects illegal mining in Nigeria with the hands of foreign miners with local criminals, as the speech states. So these are areas that shows that he is committed to addressing the challenges of climate change back home.
All right, thank you, Richard, for that. Now, Dr. Dorothy, in one of your recent interviews, you did mention that for the everyday man, it's essential to know the causes of the ozone layer depletion and to also understand what to do to reduce the effects, like stopping the use of aerosols, using roll-on deodorants instead, and also the use of generators to moderate how much we use it in the society. So away from these global meetings and the global gatherings, do you think that people are aware of the responsibilities that they should take up individually to tackle the issue of climate change? Because the change will eventually stem from individual efforts and not just these global meetings we're having.
Thank you. Yes, I'm so glad because my colleagues, the youth, like you said, are very, very much involved in what is happening to them because the future belongs to them. And when we talk about sustainability, we're talking about what happens when we, the older generation, are no longer here. So I'm quite happy to see the enthusiasm he has brought to this meeting, and also highlighting the things and the realities that we need to understand and know. Back to your question, people are not aware. And that is one of the major critical challenges being faced in Africa, because it is everybody's responsibility. And every action that we take, you and I, contributes to climate challenge that we are all facing now. So when I mentioned, that was just two things I mentioned. As simple as ensuring that you switch off your lights when you're not in the room. A lot of people don't bother. Sometimes if you're very observant, you come out and there's light. The bulbs are still on. Our buildings are built in such a way that we do not incorporate natural lighting. That is another area which affects everybody. We do not have green spaces. An entrepreneur, an investor, an estate person, somebody wants to build a house, you concrete everywhere. That is another step. So there are so many things that we as individuals need to understand. We need to be aware, and we need to accept that the way we live is contributing adversely to the environment that we have, the only one that we have. Talk about wastes. We generate tons and tons of wastes every day, every year. What do we see? Do we reduce the waste by reusing the materials that we have? Do we recycle effectively? Do we change from plastics that we know contributes the production, the usage, the disposal, contributes to climate challenge? But what do? We go to the supermarkets. I won't mention names, but there are some supermarkets. If you're buying 5 items, you're likely to go out of that supermarket with 10 nylon bags. They know themselves, so I will not mention names. But I hope that they are listening and paying attention. And I hope they're putting in place mechanisms to reduce the production of plastics. And for the man on the street, use your reusable bags. It will go a very, very long way in addressing climate crisis.
All right.
That's another way.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Dorothy, for that. Now, still talking about solutions, Richard, let's take a look at climate financing. That's one issue that we've hammered on for a long time. We have come to the conclusion that the West cannot come to our aid. I mean, even if they wanted to, they have a lot of things to shoulder as well. And so we have decided that it is up to us to finance the climate change war or battle that we're faced with. Now, speaking of climate change financing, in one of the recent summits, it was said that Nigeria and Africa generally has enough green energy to power the entire continent if we wanted to. How do we harness these our resources to tackle climate change? What solutions do you think we can adapt?
Thank you very much. As we all know that Nigeria is a huge provider of hydroelectricity to our neighboring countries like Niger, and the Republic, and other countries that surround us with hydropower. And if we could do that beyond our shores as a country, means we have what it takes to carry to provide electricity for Africa or renewable energy. And even as we speak currently, we have companies that are providing off-grid renewable energy here in Nigeria. We have a lot of companies, like for the ones I know in Niger State, in Nigeria, we have companies that have connected communities off-grid with with renewable energy, with solar power. So, and we have young people like in Nigeria that are now building in the automobile sector, that are now building solar cars in Maiduguri. And we have a young boy from the Southeast that have discovered generating plant that can run on water. So these are new innovations that, if properly harnessed, if properly put in the right perspective for commercial purpose, that means Africa has started building its own potentials. It started building its own solutions, and which are environmental friendly. So we need to come together as a country. Though I'm so excited that this year's African Climate Week that just ended in Nairobi was very, very deliberate. For the first time, we have civil society, we have the heads of government coming together to stand together to have a commitment about the climate action on the continent. And climate financing, come to think of it, the global players, the big players are not wanting to be very, very committed about the Paris Agreement. There was an agreement to have an annual $100 billion commitment for developing countries that are most vulnerable to climate change. This has not come to effect till this point as I speak. And from speeches that were delivered, we have gotten to understand that Africa needs up to $140 billion to $160 billion annually to address its climate challenges. So these are huge figures that are cumbersome. But in real sense, we can, like from the UN General Assembly, we got to understand that the president's speech was so deliberate about attracting direct foreign investment into financing climate change. And the only way we could do this is all about trying to see the green areas that will attract foreign investors so that we can attract the foreign exchange into our economy. Because as we speak currently, our inflation rates are going higher, and we need drastic solutions to address this so that the economy can be suitable for the common man. So all these green areas are now our economic experts have to look at, especially like the new blue economy we're talking about. Now we understand that the blue economy has another window for us to maximize our advantage and see how we can attract direct foreign investment to add up to the green economy. And the green economy is where the world is going. Even the UK Prime Minister, Sunak said it. Now UK are already taking drastic measures to achieve net zero, and these are pragmatic measures. So the whole world is saying like they are gradually coming off fossil fuels, and they are now accepting renewable energy to see how they can reduce their carbon cut, achieve their NDCs, and as well generate financing from that aspect. So in Africa, I believe we have to start re-strategizing, bringing the right expert to the table, both at the subnational level, at the subnational level, and even at the local government level, to see how we can remodel our financing and see how we can boost our IGR and via direct foreign investment. This has been my point of advocacy for a very long time. And I'm happy now that Mr. President has made that very clear in his speech to the UN General Assembly. And this is a strong message even to the foreign investors to know that Africa is ready, and we are going to make sure that they have the enabling environment to bring in their resources.
All right, thank you, Richard. Now, Dr. Dorothy, as the immediate past president of the Nigerian Environmental Society, can you tell us a little of what role the society plays in tackling the issue of climate change, what progress they've made so far, and what their aims are towards achieving their goals?
The first thing we put together for was awareness and advocacy. Also advising government on policies that would ensure that the treaties that we have signed as a country, as a people, are understood, properly put together and adhered to. Because like my colleague is saying, attracting foreign investors into the country will not stand alone on climate issues. We need to prove to the world that we do understand and appreciate the consequences of our actions. So if a foreigner comes into Nigeria today and sees the waste and the way in which we are managing our waste, that person is going to have a rethink. But if investors come into the country and see a country that is geared towards ensuring that the citizens understand and are imbibing a climate positive culture. For example, mass transit, rather than have cars all over the place. Luckily, the president, by removing the, what do you call this thing now, the fuel subsidies, has indirectly ensured that Nigerians don't roll out their cars in numbers. So that is a plus for Mr. President, it's a plus for Nigeria. However, when you talk about investing or you're talking about an issue, it's not a standalone thing. There are lots of other aspects of the economy that must be looked at, addressed, and reworked to ensure that people feel confident enough to bring their money. So for NES as a body, as a professional body, first is to ensure that the populace understand. We go to the grassroots. When I was there, I initiated the environmental marshals, which was tailored towards younger people at the grassroots, at the community level, teaching, ensuring that they go out to the markets, to the schools, to the old women in the villages, because a lot of climate discussions are with intellectuals. And I'm sure you will agree with me that the United Nations General Assembly meeting, how many people have, in terms of the population, how many people are watching, how many people are listening, how many people are understanding the issues being discussed? For one, I do not agree with carbon, putting a price on carbon, because what it's telling everybody is that so long as you can pay, you can pollute. So we need to take a look at that very seriously. And Africa as a continent should not copy word for word or copy everything that the West is doing, because they're totally two different scenarios, different people, different culture, different locations. So the things that affect us directly may not necessarily be what we are importing into our country and into our systems. So advocacy is number one for the NES. Awareness, and also ensuring that we come together, we bring technocrats, we bring academia, we also bring different, varied, it's a multidisciplinary association as opposed to others. A lawyer, an architect, a pharmacist, a fashion designer can be a member, because every human activity affects the planet.
All right,
thank
you so much.
And understand those interactions.
Right, thank you so much, Dr. Dorothy Bassey, for that. That was quite extensive. And thank you for mentioning that it's not just climate change activists that should be a part of the fight against climate change. To tackle these issues facing, continents across the globe, generally as a body. But my major question now is, we see so many wars and coups, and that's something that we have been talking about for a while now, happening especially across the African continent. Isn't this a major distraction from facing the major challenge, which is climate change, amongst others?
Honestly, it is indeed a major distraction. And it's quite unfortunate that Africa is waking up at this crucial time that we should be facing a much bigger and global challenge. That is not to say that some of those wars or conflicts, I wouldn't say they're necessary, but the time has come for Africa to stand as one. The time has come for Africa to unite as one. Because if you go to the West, for example, the EU is a very strong body. The citizens in the EU countries do not need visas to move around the European Union zone. Trade is easy, communication is easy, but that is not the same here. Perhaps that is where we are heading to. And if that is where we are heading to, it is a welcome thing. I recently took a trip across the West African coast, and I found out that we are so different in our policies. We are so different in our culture. We are and all these differences is inhibiting trade, communication, and of course, it will inhibit the efforts being put together by the individual countries towards tackling climate change. There is an urgency now. We do not have any more time. And the sooner our leaders understand that if we do not have our Earth, our planet intact, there will be nothing to be fighting over. That is the truth. It's a little bit too late now to be talking about this is mine, I want to go, I want to be independent, or I need to break ties with my colonial masters. It's a little bit late in the day, if you ask me. However, not discounting the needs and the aspirations of these African countries, we need to focus more on a more global issue, which is the climate change. The environment is what inhabits us as human beings. And if it is not there, so what are we fighting about? So we need to refocus that energy for generations yet unborn, because they are the most vulnerable. Women are the most vulnerable. And if I may add here, if we had more women presidents, we will not be going to war, I can assure you, because we are the most with our children and our aged people. We are going to be the ones at the receiving end. Hope the men do not take offense to that, but we women need to also stand up and speak up.
All right, Doctor.
For the planet.
Okay, thank you for that. Richard, now we see that Africa is experiencing unprecedented and a very shocking weather pattern, and it's heating faster than other parts of the world. What are the dangers if nothing is done in time?
Yeah, we have a lot of, there are a lot of dangers ahead of us if we don't act on time, because Africa is the most vulnerable. We don't yet have all the necessary technologies to address most of these climate challenges. In some countries, they have technologies like in managing flood, like we have what they call flood management systems. So in Africa, we are yet to have all these huge reservoirs where we now take advantage of flood waters as maybe raw water for our potable drinking water for our water plants. So we need to really ensure that preparedness is key. We have to start ensuring that we channel our energy towards ensuring that we provide solutions to all these challenges. Though the national government is doing its best, we have wonderful documents, we have wonderful reports, we have wonderful mechanisms in place. But how does that trickle down to the local government level, who happen to be the first respondents? As a community-based engagement organization that has been on the front line with most vulnerable communities, we've been doing our best in creating awareness and translating even the sustainable development goals into local languages. We partnered with the government of Niger State in translating the global goals so that the local people can really understand what the goals entails and what is expected of them. Because climate change has more to do with our own human activities. And most of these communities don't even understand what they do. Like, for example, you go to Niger State, it's the largest producer of charcoal and firewood in the whole of Nigeria. And Nigeria happens to be the largest producer of firewood in the whole world. So with this research, it's quite alarming. So how do you address this menace? So this is where you substitute
the current businesses they do that harm the environment with green-driven solutions and businesses that will make them have an alternative source of income from what harms the environment. Look at the issue of the oil bunkering in the south part of Nigeria and other oil producing countries in Africa. These are similar issues that affect us all. So how do we address these issues systematically, sequentially, as a continent or as a sub-region in order to ensure that we don't attract more climate crisis upon ourselves, but by providing solutions? So we have to, like I said earlier, redesign our approach, redesign our governance implementation strategy, and to capture green economy as an alternative so that we can change this circumstance from a vulnerable situation into a more economic viable potential that is around us. So, and again, it will interest you to know that Africans are the driving forces behind even the Sustainable Development Goal. Our own very own Amina J. Mohammed, the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, was the one that expanded the Millennium Development Goals into the SDGs. And if we all have all these notable people, our own Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala is in charge of the World Trade Organization as we speak. These are people that understand these mechanisms. Why can't we tap into our own human resources and see how we can come up with a workable and with a pragmatic mechanism that is implementable and is achievable within short, mid, and long-term plans for our continent, so that we can have a driving force in providing solutions for the economy and as well the climate crisis.
All right, thank you, Richard, for that. Also, Doctor, rebuilding trust and reigniting global solidarity with every possibility that this theme stems from the fact that there has been one too many divisions. I mean, talking about the theme of the UNGA. Speaking of divisions, is something we mentioned earlier. That's the ones caused by the coups, the wars, the silent beef here and there amongst countries and regions. Do you think that the Sustainable Development Goals can be achieved with all these divisions in place?
I have to be optimistic, and I would like everyone who is hearing this to be optimistic as well, because it is doable. The goals, achieving those goals are doable. We only need to commit. We only need to be sincere. We only need to be transparent. We need to have accountability, especially when it comes to financing, because going green is not cheap. The countries that have been able to meet their net zero targets, for example, invested quite a bit, invested a lot. They were committed. They got everybody on board. They made sure everybody understood how it would affect them. So I am optimistic, but we need to be committed, and we need to ensure that we allocate enough funding, because like my colleague has said, the young ones, the resources are there. They are able and well informed to know what needs to be done. The innovations are there. The creativity to rework what has been done in the past to ensure it meets the goals of the future is there. So I'm very, very optimistic. Though we may want to say, okay, because we're so far behind in meeting our goals and objectives, we want to give up. No, we cannot afford to give up. Yes, indeed, we do not have more time, but if we understand the synergies, the dynamics, the interactions between economy, the environment, sustainability, governance, and development, we can meet those goals.
All right, Dr. Dorothy, thank you so much. I still have my guest with me. Please hold your thoughts. We've got breaking news in the studio, an update to development in Bauchi State regarding the governorship election petition tribunal, and we'll bring that to you right away. Now, news just reaching us in the studio says Bauchi State Governorship Election Petition Tribunal has affirmed the victory of Governor Bala Muhammad of the People's Democratic Party, the PDP, in the March 18th governorship election held in the state. The judgment was delivered by a three-man panel chaired by Justice P.T. Kwahar. The petition filed by the All Progressives Congress and its governorship candidate, former Chief of Air Staff Air Marshal Sadiq Abubakar. It also held that there is no strong reason to nullify the election as the election was conducted in compliance with the law. Well, of course, News Central will bring you updates to the situation as it unfolds. But coming back to the conversation now, Richard, and this will be my final question on the show. Do you think that this is another opportunity for the president to try and broker more international ties? I mean, taking it back to his agenda when attending some of these summits, can we say that that agenda can translate to this? Can we get more foreign direct investment from this summit, or is it going to be like a deviation from the actual aim of the summit?
No. The president definitely, I'm confident and very optimistic that he's going to attract a lot of partnerships from the summit. He's going to bring in development experts. He's going to see how best that can come on ground here in Nigeria. Because from why I would say this is because in the last COP we had in Egypt at Sharm el-Sheikh in 2022, last November, Lagos State government was able to attract an investment of 100 million euros to Lagos because they had a presentation of their climate change investment plan at the COP 27 in Sharm el-Sheikh. And again, they got a grant of 5 million euros for achieving the current metro train system they have in Lagos currently. Them and Senegal attracted 10 million euros to Africa as grants. So you see, we are already receiving climate investors. Lagos State has last year attracted 100 million euros. Mr. President is on ground at the UN General Assembly with his suitcase. And I know he has a lot of stuff there to see how he can woo more investors into Nigeria and Africa. So these are very, very clear issues that there are a lot of funding for developing countries that have a working mechanism towards green economy, towards the blue economy, that are very serious about these issues. And for our president to be very, very categorical about this he means business. So I'm very optimistic about the ongoing UN General Assembly. I'm very confident about Nigeria's position at the United Nations. And I'm looking forward to see, because before even the last COP, Nigeria has the National Climate Change Council. So we have a whole institution that is in charge of climate change and everything that has to do with climate change, independent of the Federal Ministry of Environment, though they are a parastatal under that, but they are solely on that. So these are direct measures that tells you that Nigeria is ready. Our green bonds are active, have been active, and we have like the climate change fund, ecological fund that are being given to states to address their climate challenges. So these are sheer, real commitment, pragmatic commitment shown by Nigeria. And I'm very confident that Mr. President is going to scale that up. And with our own commitment as advocates and as civil society, as private sector, we're going to ensure that we drive that process. Already, a lot of engagements have been on, and I'm very confident that the effect will be felt
All right.
in no distant time.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you so much. I would like to say thank you so much to Dr. Dorothy Bassey, the immediate past president of the Nigerian Environmental Society. And of course, thanks to Richard Abubakar Umar, the founder of Youth Voyage. Thanks for joining us on the program.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All
Thanks
right.
for having us.
All right, we're still following live the United Nations General Assembly and bringing you updates right here on News Central Television. Don't forget, it's over 150 world leaders gathered to achieve one sole purpose, and that is to meet the Sustainable Development Goals before the 2030 deadline. For more updates on this, do well to stay tuned to News Central Television as we bring you the updates as it unfolds. Thank you for joining us on Village Square Africa. My name is Blessings Mosugu. Do have a lovely day.